Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10 o'clock p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Friday night, April the 8th. I'm glad to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention, and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And the chat room is open if anybody would like to sit in there and hang out. We're talking about child abuse. I'm just a private citizen paying to do these shows. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. And, I'm not a counselor or therapist or anything like that. And I just wanted to be one more voice, really speaking out against abuse. I started doing Blog Talk Radio November 2009. I've done about 660 or 670 shows, and, that's a lot of shows. I never really I didn't know how long I'd be doing Blog Talk Radio. I thought I might try it for a few months and, just see, if people were interested in tuning in. I appreciate everybody who's listening to the shows. It's just awesome. I didn't realize so many people would be tuning in, and I thank you all for being here and being part of this. It makes it worthwhile for me to come on and do these shows. So thank you so much for tuning in. And, I do them early in the morning and late at night because I have to work. I work full time, and I have a life outside of this. I've got a sweetheart who's terminally ill, and I try to spend time with him. And, I'm a Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, which keeps me busy. And I'm pretty busy, so my shows all have to be early in the morning and late at night. That could change down the road. For now, that's what they are. So thanks, everybody, for being here and tuning in at the most strange times of the day and the night. I want to continue looking at a PDF that I was talking about really all week, and this is it's a really good PDF, 102 pages long, this one, and I doubt we'll cover the whole thing, but I just wanted to sort of take a look at it because there is some good information on here, and it's called Preventing Child Maltreatment, A Guide to Taking Action and Generating Evidence. This is put out by the World Health Organization, the WHO, and also the ISPCAN, IPSCAN, and that's the International Society for Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect. And they put this out in 2006, so it's not all that old, and I just think this information is really worth taking a look at, and it's really good stuff. And I found this on the Child Welfare Information Gateway. I just was searching under the letter C, I think I was searching under child abuse, and this PDF came up, and that's why, Child Welfare Information Gateway has tons and tons of publications and information, resources, and statistics, fact sheets, everything to do with child abuse, child maltreatment, child rights, help for parents. It's just all kinds of good information on that website, and you can check it out, all their publications, and check out their library. They have tons and tons of stuff you can get right online and just download it or just read it or whatever. There's just really good information there, so I hope everybody will go check it out. www.childwelfare.gov, Child Welfare Information Gateway. And they have tons. I've been using them as a resource for years and years, and they just have tons and tons of good stuff on there. So that's where I found this PDF. And we're on page 21, and I just wanted to sort of touch on a few things. They had some pretty good information here that I thought was worth taking a look at. So thanks, everybody, for being here. And, I'm talking about abuse. Abuse is a sensitive subject, so I always say this on every show. You have to listen at your own discretion because I don't sugarcoat it. I just tell it like it is. And abuse is harsh. It's a harsh reality for a lot of people. It's my reality because the leftovers of being a survivor of child abuse, it's my reality. It's my world. And whether I choose to speak out about it or not, it really, doesn't change the fact that this is my reality. And this is what I face every morning when I wake up, and I face every night before I go to bed, is the knowledge and the memories of my youth and my childhood. Right, so I'm stuck with it. I was forced to endure it. I'm stuck with it as an adult as well because I can't deny my past. If I deny my past, then I forget who I am. Period. And so that's why we have to stop child abuse, because if it doesn't kill a child, it's so damaging. The effects of child abuse, it doesn't matter what kind it is. It's all so damaging, and so many people have to learn then how to heal and how to deal with the issues, from their past. And so many times, I know so many people myself who are survivors of child abuse, and I knew so many kids growing up who were abused as well. I just see what it does to people, and I know myself I'm pretty high functioning, but does it mean, that I'm any less damaged? Not at all. And, 4 years, up until 4 years ago, I was still planning my suicides. So that just tells you how serious this is. And, people, even if they are high functioning and can hold jobs down, it doesn't mean that they're not affected by it and that it hasn't severely damaged them. And so I wanted to be one more voice speaking out about this stuff, right? So I'm talking about abuse. It's a sensitive subject, so you have to know what's good for you to listen to. And so ultimately it is your discretion. You listen at your own discretion, and if abuse topics bother you, then you should not be listening to this show or any show like it. If you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my show, because young people need protection and they need to know how to keep themselves safe. So if you're under 18, you make sure you have someone listen to the show with you who's an adult who can help make the decision whether you should be listening or not. And that's, a parent, a caregiver, somebody who can help you to decide whether it's age appropriate for you, because ultimately it's about stopping child abuse, but there's a lot of adult material on here, and a lot of times people especially young people, may have not heard a whole lot about abuse. If they haven't really, ever been around anybody who's been abused or heard about abuse, it could be kind of scary, the topic, and also just confusing, because young people, if they haven't heard a whole lot about abuse, may not quite understand what this is all about, right? And so, have permission to listen to my shows if you're under the age of 18. So thanks for being here. I appreciate it, everybody. We'll get right into this, and we left off just talking about the different types of abuse from this PDF. And this is sort of taking a worldwide look at the whole thing, but it's mainly focusing on child maltreatment, child abuse, and prevention of child maltreatment. And so on page 21, there's this little information, sort of a little information fact sheet there, and that's what I want to talk about tonight. It's the discipline or punishment, box 1.2, and I'm just reading right from the page, so I'll just throw my own stuff in there probably too, because I always do. Discipline for children involves training and helping them develop judgment, a sense of boundaries, self-control, self-sufficiency, and positive social conduct. Discipline is frequently confused with punishment, particularly by caregivers who use corporal punishment in an attempt to correct and change children's behavior. There are several differences between discipline and punishment. So they say here, positive strategies of discipline recognize children's individual worth. They aim to strengthen children's belief in themselves and their ability to behave appropriately and to build positive relationships. On the other hand, punishment involving either physical or emotional measures often reflects the caregiver's anger or desperation, rather than a thought-out strategy intended to encourage the child to understand expectations of behavior. And such punishment uses external controls and involves power and dominance. It is also frequently not tailored to the child's age and developmental level. And they said that corporal punishment entails the use of physical force. It has been commonly used in many societies in the past, and the exact form it takes varies according to culture and religion. Research also has shown that it is not effective in promoting the desired change in behavior in any lasting way. The behavioral and emotional consequences of corporal punishment vary according to how frequently and how severely the punishment is applied, as well as to the age, developmental state, vulnerability, and resilience of the child. Corporal punishment can cause relationships to break down. It serves to humiliate children and can lead to physical injury and serious impairment in development. And all children need discipline, and it is best if children can be supported in developing their own self-discipline. An approach to discipline should be encouraged that uses alternatives to corporal punishment. And these include such methods as distraction and redirection, the fixing of a cooling-off period, the setting of rules and limits appropriate to the child's age and developmental level, problem solving, and the withdrawal of privileges. So that's just an interesting little tidbit of information. I grew up in a home full of corporal punishment, which really was abuse, and because anything that hurts and harms a child or potentially has the risk of hurting or harming a child is abuse. And, I know what this is all about, as far as being physically beaten and emotionally and psychologically abused and, verbally battered. It's absolutely horrific what people will do to their children. My parents were born in the 1920s, and they had no good parenting skills. They were both abused themselves as children. And so they grew up like this. This is how they treated their own children. So they figured, well, it worked for them, so it must work. Although they did not like to be abused, and they used to complain about the fact that they were abused as children. They went on to abuse their own children and were brought up on charges. So there you go. Absolutely horrific. And there's a fine line between, what is, discipline or what is abuse. Because, children do need direction. I don't even like to call it discipline. I like to call it direction, because children need direction. You can't just let a child run wild and do whatever they want. It's not a good idea, because it causes all kinds of problems for the child if you do that. They need direction. They need help. They need guidance, right? And when they're not behaving properly and they're doing things that are wrong, and that they shouldn't be doing, They need direction. They don't need to be beaten on and kicked and punched and slapped in the face and knocked to the ground, thrown into walls, choked and beat on with belts and other implements, They don't need to be burned. They don't need to be choked and strangled and hung over doorways or, thrown in the tub and beaten. They don't need any of that. They don't need to be isolated and locked behind a door for 3 days with no clothes and no food. I mean, people just, I don't get it. I don't understand what the issue is with this whole issue of abuse, right? But that's what I'm doing. I'm talking about this, and this is what we need to do. We need to talk about this because this is so incredibly wrong, and people are still doing this to children, right? It's absolutely horrific. And, and just neglect, even just neglecting the child. That's the most common type of abuse, and it's horrific. It's not good at all. And the thing is, there has to be a better way. If your child, if you're at your wit's end and you're a parent and you just don't know how you're going to cope and you don't want to hurt your child, make sure you get some help and do not lash out at your child and take out your frustrations on your child because they are, sending you over the edge because their behavior is just so bad, right? There has to be a better way than abusing the child, right? Because that doesn't help anyway. You know what I mean? I was beaten and abused and kicked around and punched and slapped and kicked and thrown downstairs and, beaten with implements, bloodied, And to help my behavior? Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, it caused me to be a very hateful child. I hated my parents and I hated what they were doing to each other and I hated what they were doing to us as a family and my other siblings. It caused me to have a lot of anger, so I was very much an angry child and I was not very good to my friends because I would beat up my friends because I was being beaten up and I thought that's what you were supposed to do when you were mad. And it basically just taught me how to hit. So my parents taught me how to behave like them because I just picked up their behaviors and, became a sort of a bullyish type abuser child who would beat up my friends if they did something to one of my toys or something, because that's how I was being treated, viciously and violently. And so I just took that on as behavior. I thought that's the way it went. I grew up in that. And so, of course, then if my mom caught me misbehaving and slapping one of my friends or doing something like that, then I would be beaten again for doing that. So they turned me into a monster child and then made me pay the price for it. And so my parents, they literally turned their children into these creatures that they couldn't stand and that they hated because of the abuse. And then because their children were acting out and because of the abuse, they abused us even more. So we were confused and abused and confused. We'll just say that. And, it's absolutely horrific that people will do this to their children. And I witnessed so much abuse in my lifetime, like, domestic violence and abuse in my own home, child abuse in my own home, every type of child abuse, and I'm a survivor of it all, so it's absolutely horrific. And, to think that people out here just think that it's okay that doing these things to their children is just discipline. Oh, the child needs to be treated this way. This is the only way I'll get through to them. Some parents think that by beating their children or slamming their children's head into the wall or to the ground that, that will solve the problem. No, it won't solve anything. And the child certainly doesn't deserve that. What they need is direction, not abuse, right? And so there's a fine line between that, and I wish people would sort of wake up and smell the coffee and stop abusing their children, because then we could all go on and do something else, right? I mean, I would really like that. I wish we could stop child abuse like right now, because I have a million other things I really would prefer to be doing, but I refuse because I have to be a voice for these children, right? And I hope everybody else will do the same. I know that most people who listen to my shows are advocates anyway, or people that, work with children who have been abused and people who care about children. So, that's just awesome, right? But I know that I'm hoping to reach one person who just may have just not really known a whole lot about abuse, you know what I mean? And who will then learn the signs and symptoms and look out for the children in their own lives, make sure that they're not being abused. I'm hoping to reach one person who's a survivor who will tune into my morning shows and just realize that we certainly didn't deserve to be treated this way, and that we deserve to heal and have a good life, and we're going to have to do that ourselves. We're going to have to reach out and get some help is what we're going to have to do. And for parents who are struggling, to make sure that you don't hurt your child ever, because you can never take it back. Once you mistreat your child and once you abuse your child and hurt your child, it can't be taken back. And so that's the whole issue. Once it's done, and the damage is done. And then that child will have to learn how to heal from that, a damaged child, a broken child, coming from, a brokenness and trying to learn how to be whole. And you do not want to be the cause of that. But so many people don't care. They just abuse their children and other people's children, and they just think it's just the way it's supposed to be. And there's a whole lot of society that needs a whole lot of education, regarding child abuse and the issues that surround it. It's just absolutely horrific. We can't even talk enough about this. This is so incredibly wrong. You know what I mean? That people just think it's okay to burn their children and batter their children and break their children's bones and, break their children's heads and shake their babies till they're dead. Suffocate their children, sexually use their children. I mean, my God, if you think the stats are the stats. They are what they are. The facts are the facts. And as far as the stats that we know, that we see out here, public information, 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 6 boys will be sexually abused in some way under the age of 18. So, whether that's unwanted sexual touching, molestation, exploitation, rape, you name it. That's what it is. So 1 out of 3 girls, 1 out of 6 boys will experience some type of sexual abuse before they're 18. And this is absolutely unacceptable, because it tells you how many sick people are out there sexually abusing children. And where is this happening? It's happening in homes mainly, or someone the child knows. The other 5 to 10% is stranger danger. The rest of it is all someone the child knows. At 33% is the parents. Absolutely horrific. You know what I mean? This is just, it's not, we cannot stop talking about this. The minute the society decides that, we're not going to talk about this anymore, we're just going to shut it down, shove it back under the carpet. No, that's where it's been. And that's why it's so important for people to raise their voice, make some noise, and get involved locally, get involved nationally, get involved, but just make sure you get involved. Because children do not deserve to be abused, ever. There should be no child out here tonight crying and screaming and pleading for their lives and begging for mercy. If they're old enough to talk and they're, trying to plead for their lives. There should be no child out here who's trying to ward off a family member's raping them. Children are not sex toys. They are not to be used for sexual purposes of any kind. And so, I'm on a little bit of a rant here tonight, but I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse. It just makes me angry that people are out here using children sexually. Children are not sex toys. They are children. They should be allowed to be children. And these sick people who decide that they're going to use a child sexually, there isn't a punishment too harsh enough for them, as far as I'm concerned. And people say, well, they're sick and they just don't know. Well, no, I don't care how sick they are. They have hurt a child, they have damaged a child, and they should have to pay for that. You know what I mean? And I don't care how sick they are. I'm sorry. They're not the victim, as far as I'm concerned. It's the child. The child who's the one who's had their rights infringed upon by somebody who's chosen to abuse them. And so we've got to stop protecting the abusers. It's like, they didn't know any better. It wasn't their fault. They were abused as children themselves. I don't care. My parents were abused as children too. Did it give them a right to abuse us and have to end up in court? I'm glad they got busted. But the thing is the issue is, did the abuse stop? No, it didn't. So that's the issue, right? This is, people like to protect abusers and they like to stand up for child sexual abusers and stuff like this. Well, I'm sorry. I stand up for the children. I'm a voice for these children out here, and I think we all need to be a voice for these children out here. Absolutely important that we do. The next box, 1.3 in this PDF, and this is really interesting, the relationship of child maltreatment and other adverse childhood experiences to leading causes of death in adults, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And they said the Adverse Childhood Experiences ACE study, in which some 17,300 middle-aged, middle-class, and mostly employed residents of the state of California participated, suggests that childhood maltreatment and household dysfunction contribute to the development decades later of the chronic diseases that are the most common causes of death and disability in the United States. The study examined the long-term effects of maltreatment and household dysfunction during childhood, including psychological, physical, and sexual abuse, violence against the mother, and living with household members who were either substance abusers, mentally ill, or suicidal, or else had been imprisoned. So let me tell you about that. As far as that goes, I grew up in that, right? Maltreatment, household dysfunction, including psychological, physical, and sexual abuse. That was all present in my home. Violence against the mother, that was present in the home. Living with household members who were either substance abusers, mentally ill, or suicidal, that was present in the home. My parents were suicidal as well as some of my siblings, and one of my siblings actually killed himself and had been in prison, family members in prison. That was also in my home. So I went through all of that, had to grow up in that, right, and try to make sense of my life. It was pretty twisted. A strong relationship was seen between the number of adverse experiences, including physical and sexual abuse in childhood, and self-reports of cigarette smoking, obesity, physical inactivity, alcoholism, drug abuse, depression, attempted suicide, sexual promiscuity, and sexually transmitted diseases in later life. And I know myself, I've experienced, a lot of that, cigarette smoking, obesity, physical inactivity, that's for sure, because I'm kind of broken physically, right? Drug abuse, definitely. Until I was 21, and I finally got off the drugs. Depressions, yeah. Attempted suicide, never attempted it. I just planned my suicides. So that's because my family was suicidal, and I realized that I didn't want to commit suicide. But the thing is it was always in the back of my mind. Sexual promiscuity, no. I was just shut down completely sexually, and sexually because I was abused sexually as a child. So and watching my mother be sexually abused and raped by my father, really kind of put me off. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want anything to do with that. So and it took its toll. That's for sure. Sexually transmitted diseases in later life, and that's from promiscuous, what I mean? If people who have been abused or growing up in these, in these dysfunctional homes, sometimes do go out and go the other way and are promiscuous. I know I had a friend like that. And they said, furthermore, people who reported higher numbers of negative experiences in childhood were much more likely to exhibit multiple health risk behaviors, which the study suggested were adopted as coping devices. And similarly, the more adverse childhood experiences reported, the more likely the person was to have heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, skeletal fractures, liver disease, and poor health as an adult. And so, my mother was, she had heart disease. She was abused as a child, and then she was abused in this marriage. And she was my main abuser. And she had heart disease. She was having strokes. She had all kinds of problems. She had major health issues. She had all kinds of issues with her intestines and all kinds of things that were wrong with her, and her health was really bad most of her life. She used to hemorrhage and bleed, and she would hemorrhage when she was young, in her 20s, and they told her not to have any more children. And then after my brother was born, he was the 5th child born, but they told her no more children, you should not have any more children because you could die or the children will die. Well, she had a total of 5 more. And 2 of us made it, and the other 3 were stillborn. And her life was almost lost a couple of those times. And with me, I was the last child born, and they had to take me early as a C-section because months early, actually almost 2.5 months early, because she was dying and I was dying. So they had to get me out, and so I was born a preemie weighing about 2.5 pounds. And so I wasn't fully developed, and my mother was in a coma. And so, the issues of people who don't take care of themselves. My mother, like I said, she was abused as a child, right? So this stuff is, it's just, these studies, they're absolutely correct. And, too many people have lived like this. Too many people know what this is like, right? Maltreatment and other adverse childhood experiences may thus be among the basic factors that underlie health risks, illness, and death, and could be identified by routine screening of all patients. And they said, although the ACE study and its findings relate to a specific population within the United States, it is reasonable to assume that similar trends might be found in countries with different levels of economic and social development. And that was from Politi, Vijay, and all, Relationship of Childhood Abuse and Household Dysfunction to Many of the Leading Causes of Death in Adults. The Adverse Childhood Experiences ACE Study, American Journal of Prevention Medicine, 1998, 14:245 through 245 through 258. So it's just an interesting take on it, that it certainly does take its toll. And the stress of living in an abusive environment, is incredibly hard on children. It's hard on the whole family, right? It's hard on, if there's a lot of domestic violence and abuse and a lot of dysfunction in the home, a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing, and whatever type of abuse is going on, whether it's physical, verbal, emotional, psychological, sexual abuse. It's hard to grow up in a home like that because your nerves are shot. Because there's a fight could break out at any time. And generally, for people who live in violent homes, it does, and it will. And so it's not like you think there'd be one time where it got out of control and then, we got violent and then never again. This would be something that happens on a regular basis, and so it's coming. It's just a matter of time. It's a matter of whether it's a few hours or if it's tonight or if it's tomorrow morning or the next day. Or the next day, and then the next day. And it just goes on and on and on. And I spent my whole life like that. And so as a child, I was quite often nervous and uptight, and especially when I was really young. And then when I got older, I kind of became desensitized. So plates could be flying, my mom could beat me up, and I was just desensitized to it. It was just the way I lived my life. So it just became the norm. But the issue is I was always in a heightened state of alert. And it was always adrenaline running through my body, because the adrenaline, you can't really stop that. Like if somebody's going to attack you, generally it's a fight or flight situation, so your body, tries to protect itself, right? So the blood will run to surround your heart and your organs. So all the blood will generally leave your extremities and race towards your heart and your liver and your kidneys and whatnot to protect your organs, right? So the blood kind of flows through to your heart, then your adrenaline starts pumping, and before you know it, you're in a heightened sense of panic. And that's when somebody's going to beat on you or hurt you or slap you around, throw you around, and kick you around. That's the state you're in. So when you spend enough time like that, in that state, it does an incredible amount of damage, along with the beatings and the physical violence that's being inflicted on a child. Along with those responses from the body, to live like that is absolutely horrific. I detailed that in my book, A Life of Death and Redemption, and also the Levita Juvies. And it's so horrific. I remember the feelings of what, the fear, really, of what my mother could do to me. Because, when somebody hurts a child, all they have to do is hurt a child one time really bad, and that child will always remember that. And so, a parent or somebody who's gotten a hold of a child who's going to hurt that child will always remember, that the first time. And that feeling will come back every time there's a threat. So even my mom didn't even have to hurt me, and my body would shut down. She didn't even have to hit me, and my body would automatically go into a fight or flight. All she had to do was raise her hand to backhand me or something, and I would be right into that state again. And that's from her, hurting me so severely that, that was my reaction, And so I remember, the feelings of my body, and my body just freaking out about the abuse, you know what I mean? So it's horrific what that does to children and what that does to a person's body, and it's no wonder that people who have been abused have a lot of problems later in life with all kinds of health issues and different things. And we do have to be very aware, that we do have to pay special attention to ourselves and try to overcome that and try to sort of make up for that as adults in our own lives, you know what I mean, to get help with that, right? It's absolutely horrific what this does to people. So thanks, everybody, for being here. We only have about a minute left. We'll talk about susceptibility and risk factors on Monday night. And we'll just go through a few more pieces of this PDF before we leave it. But it is really good, and I hope everybody will check it out. And it's from the WHO, the World Health Organization, and it's called Preventing Child Maltreatment, a guide to taking action and generating evidence. And if you go to their website, I bet you they have this on their website. Preventing Child Maltreatment, a guide to taking action and generating evidence. It's just an awesome PDF. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. Do whatever you can to be a voice for these children out here tonight who we will not be able to get to. They will lose their lives, or they will be crippled by the abuse, or they will not get any help, and they will just be continued to have to live and endure the abuse, whatever the abuse is that they're having to suffer through. So be a voice for these kids out here tonight. Be a voice for these kids out here. We've got to stop child abuse, and it's really going to take all of us. So thanks, everybody, for listening and tuning in. I'll be back on the weekend as well as next week. And Monday night, Don't forget Monday night, Ray Luskin, 7:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and we're going to be talking. She's going to be doing some healing through art and creativity. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Take good care of yourselves. Bye bye.